I think something else that's interesting is like, for example, it may not simply be one event. So like the Maasai of Kenya and Tanzania have got several rites of passage. So boys between the age of 10 and 20, well, come together to be initiated as the new warrior class of the tribe. Uh, and they get placed in, well, dozens of houses built specifically for the occasion. So the night before the ceremony, the boys would sleep outside in the forest, and at dawn they return for a day of singing and dancing.
So, welcome to another episode of the Moment podcast. Today, I've here some different people with me. Atom, myself, Lynn, and Mcapello, and the idea is to talk a bit about self-initiation and rites of passage. And really with the idea, because, well, there was like a previous talk done on really about like the kind of the wolf shamanism and different like old, I guess you can say, initiation rites that people used to do within the culture and different cultures. And what kind of became clear is that maybe not for everyone, but for some people at least, this kind of thing is missing, and it's kind of like this talk is kind of meant as like I don't know, a way to like maybe bring some ideas forward of like, well, what could we actually do in the modern sense? It's like we have these like ancient and like maybe less ancient ways of how people used to do it, and like how can we bring that back in some form, in like a group form, or like or whatever. It's like or just as an individual, like, yeah, how would we do that? And it's kind of like one big question I want to like bring forward with this. So in that sense, I don't know if you have any like I guess any questions to like about this topic, maybe that like I could get I don't know, you, I guess, up to date more about this like idea about like this kind of like the need in the culture that seems to be there. Because I don't know, what I can say is just that it's kind of like also a psychological need to go through these like rides to update kind of the ego consciousness in some way. So it's updated through these rides. And yeah, really, I guess there's like a reconnection back to like instincts, or in some sense, with like this like wolf shamanism thing that I earlier just mentioned. But at the same time, there's like different ones, like the wild hunt, but also like I guess similar different rituals in even like some like tribes, like more like animistic tribes nowadays, that have like these rituals that they're like the person is like integrated into the tribe, into the collective in some manner. So they have like a proper relation between like ego and self, and really the person and the collective. So there's like a proper balance with that. And yeah, so I've been looking into a lot of these things, and the thing is just like, yeah, but like how would we do that? So I don't know if you have any particular I guess ideas on that. Like, I mean, I read that I think it was in Man and the Symbols that Carl Jung had said like, yeah, there's different tribes that do things like with the integration into society, like circumcision or like all kinds of brutal things. It's like maybe I don't know. There's different ways of doing that, like a modern approach to something to have the same effect. But things like, what would that be? I don't know.
I have a question about that, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess it's a question about scale or context, but when you're talking about initiation or rites of passage, there's an element of second order observation sort of involved, where it's that self other boundary where the other is sort of looking back on the self as it goes through this passage, and there's something in that moment of recognition culturally that's doing a lot of the work. So when we talk about self-initiation or initiation in maybe smaller groups, if that rite of passage is not understood or recognized by the broader society that that person is living in, how much power does it still have?
And I think that's a very fair question to ask, because if you look at like a lot of these tribes and also, well, really with the past, with these different cultures, it was a cultural thing. And for one thing, with, for instance, the Wild Hunt, it's like they came back and then it was like the community would come together and then they would like ritualistically die and be reborn, and then for the people of the community, now they're a man. So it's like, yeah, so in that sense you're right that there's something like that in that. So maybe self-initiation is in that sense something, maybe even that's not I guess possible in that sense. Maybe, I mean, I don't really know, but I do know that there is like there seems to be a need for this kind of thing, for people to I don't know, not just really like transition from like from, well, a boy and a girl to a man and a woman, but also really like integrate into society as a whole, to actually feel part of it and actually be 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 a part of it in a different kind of context than, I guess, something that is more I don't know, I guess more isolated and not really connected.
Yeah, and I think.
I'm just
Oh, go ahead.
sorry. There are many different initiation ceremonies. So, would we say that initiation ceremonies would also be, another way of saying it is coming of age into the tribe? So coming of age initiation into the tribe. Anyway, yes.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mcapello.
I was going to say it seems like you're right, seems to be a social need for it, even to the extent I would say that even though we've lost a lot of those traditions in most Western cultures, they also still exist in some ways as these sort of degraded milestones. Like in the United States, for example, I would say if you're, at least when I was growing up, um, you know, getting your driver's license and driving a car and like being able to take risks in that way and becoming socially independent was a rite of passage. And there's something about independence and risk-taking that's bound up with that is socially recognized, even though there's not a ritual associated with it, even though there's no mythology or deeper meaning associated with it. It is still something that the rest of society is looking towards and is recognizing when it happens as, okay, you've made it, you're now accepted, at least by degree, as being closer to an adult or a man than you were before. So I think what I'm trying to say is that the architecture for these experiences is still something we know how to look for, and it's still something we try to do, even if we don't know that we're trying to do it. And to that extent, it's almost like there's something in us, archetypically or primordially, that is ready to take up something that fits the right pattern, I guess you could say. So even if these rituals are somewhat invented, I don't necessarily know that they won't work either. Does that make sense? Because we're so ready for them.
I do think that it's been or like it's kind of innate in us, this coming of age, or like moving from one state of your life to the next, beginning anew in a different role. It is part of who we are. So in that way, it's like it's carried in our genome and in our instincts. So I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, and I kind of would like to add to that, like, because I've personally been like going through some of the stuff. It's like more like I guess you could say like the unconscious, or like the trying to like tell me something about my need to grow up, and some stuff that I went through. And it's kind of why because how it was like coming up for me was in this form of like this wolf shamanism stuff, this Koryos stuff. And well, I just started basically doing that, like enacting that. And but the thing is that even though like in some way it like helped, or like for me to actually feel I don't know, I guess different, it's still like, I don't know, like how you earlier pointed out, like a valid thing. It's like, even though I feel maybe different about things, it's like, well, how about like the community, like how because it used to be indeed like connected, and that's kind of, yeah, a valid thing. But I do think that like what Lynn pointed out, and what I think you're also kind of talking about, is like, yeah, there's a connection there with like the instincts and something deeper within us. And maybe there lies some of the answer in that regard, like how to maybe, I guess, solve that for individuals.
Yeah, so I guess one question there to keep that moving a little bit is to ask, what are those universals, or what are those archetypical structures that, even if there's no culturally accepted name for them or universally observed ritual for them, they are still, like, for example, risk taking, or um, some sort of voluntary hardship, right? People understand that even if there's not a name for it. So it seems like there are probably a finite number of fairly distinct things from cultures all around the world that people go through to have these moments of recognition, that we're probably built to understand, that we're built to see on some level. what are they? Like, it seems like that would be the meeting point between something that we are making ourselves, but also something that is already there within us at some level.
Yeah, and in that sense, huh? In that sense, like I would think like, yeah, it does seem to be like, you know, that there would need to be like that a working together of like the, I guess, the unconscious archetypal forces on the one hand, but at the same time also like something like that. I guess people are looking for, or like these greater patterns. Do you know that? I don't know. For me, kind of on the thing is then like yeah. What I guess like what would that even be? How would that even work? But like yeah, I like I said, that's something that I'm just like, I don't know. But maybe it really is about maybe like people starting to do these things, even if it is like first like unconscious in some way, and we don't really know exactly why we're doing it, but we're kind of doing it and like refiguring this out as like maybe a culture, or like different communities in that way, and then maybe from that it grows into something like culture, like something in the culture again, and maybe that has like this meaning to it too, and it's not like as, I guess, degraded. So maybe in that sense it's, yeah, maybe like yeah, an organic thing, and maybe it will grow. Yeah.
I think that maybe if we look at it from the perspective of like, why did we become like kind of distanced from these rites of passage? And I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that people are not in touch with their instincts as before. In modern day, it's more mental focus, and maybe we are not used to or initiated into listening even to our instincts, and letting them, even though we don't always understand them, letting them work together with us so that we can move forward.
So in that sense, it would be then like an alignment of like, I guess, like the mental, but also like the instinctual then, so that then you align these, so that then, I guess, well, in that sense, because I've seen a while ago something from Jung to Live By, that then if you like align that then the I think it is the meta instinct, like the affect, is then gonna come up, and then something boils up from the instincts, and it's like, well, this is like how we used to do it, or this is something for solving it, and you do that, and then it kind of solves the problem, kind of thing. But it's this like alignment that from what they said, that it's key in that. So I think yeah, you're onto something there with that alignment.
And since the instincts are kind of subconscious for us, then maybe also through other means, the subconscious tries to bring our attention to these things, like maybe through dreams or such.
I think something that might be interesting to look at would be the the kind of coming of age or initiation rituals of different cultures around the world, well, thousands of miles apart or closer together. And from what I've seen and read about, many of these cultures share a point in time where the person who's been a child then becomes either an adult or is initiated into the wider society. As far as I can tell, this is roundabout. Yeah, there's a vast amount of different types of initiation ceremony. So you've got ranging from the Inuit tribe who go out into the they go out with their fathers and they go out and to show their hunting skills. And then they bring back a large predator, and they will go out for maybe 2 weeks, a month, in order to do these things. Or the sunrise ceremony of the Apache tribe, which takes place over 4 days, which is for girls, and they effectively reenact the Apache origin myth, which basically makes each female participant who is coming of age becomes, for a moment, the first woman until they finish the ceremony, and then they are a woman, no longer a girl. So I think it's all of these, and then you've got the other interesting little thing, which is shared by both Jewish and some parts of the Muslim world, which is the what's the word now? Circumcision of boys, and the circumcision of boys, first of all, around about at the age of 11, and the first period of girls. So you could say that will be sort of and that's not just taken up by those particular religions. That's spread out in different parts of the world that have would have previously had no contact with each other. And I think it's interesting that these particular rituals have developed with no contact with these other summer piece.
It indeed is. It indeed is. It's like, I don't know. I mean, the wolf shamanism stuff that I talked about similarly is about it. It stems from like an older tradition about like the man, but also women going out to hunt and to get a large predator. But also, I know from like the ancient Greeks that they had, like with Artemis, these bear rituals that they would be enacting the bear, the great she bear, and through that, similarly, they would become a woman in their own right. So there's like, in some form, like there is something there, like linked, because the great she bear. From what I remember, is also in these ancient rituals is also connected to other more ancient rituals that are connected to like the Great Mother and the Mother of the Mountain and such kind of rituals too. So there's like maybe something there that is very much like archetypal and connected to like. It's like a deeper creation myth and deeper myths like that in some way.
I think something else that's interesting is like, for example, it may not simply be one event. So like the Maasai of Kenya and Tanzania have got several rites of passage. So boys between the age of 10 and 20, well, come together to be initiated as a new warrior class of the tribe. And they get placed in, well, dozens of houses built specifically for the occasion. So the night before the ceremony, the boys would sleep outside in the forest, and at dawn they return for a day of singing and dancing. They drink these incredible drinks, which is effectively a mixture of alcohol, cow's blood, and milk, and eating. Well, it's basically a feast of meat. After all these festivities, we're going to come back to circumcision. They get circumcisioned again. That's the first transformation into a man, warrior, and protector. And they can't flinch during this. While that's occurring, it's done without anesthesia, and they cannot flinch during it because it's shameful. And then, interestingly, they then leave the main area and disappear off into a specialized area off in the wilderness called the Warriors' Camp, which they'll remain in for the next 10 to 20 years. And they basically become completely removed from the section. This is where you are now. And anyway, I think it's absolutely fascinating, the Maasai, the particular Maasai one. Anyhow.
It kind of reminds me of like this whole like this wolf shamanism, like Koryos thing, because they would have like the tribe, and they would become part of this for like 6 to 7 years, and they would be like outside of the tribe as like a pack, as like they would imitate wolves, and they would like hunt as that pack together, and they would be just outside of the tribe. They couldn't rely on the tribe. They would have to rely on themselves as the pack. There would be often like an older figure as like a leader with them, one that already had gone through it, that would but also similarly like something like what you're saying here, and then later they come back, and then there's another ritual, and then they become accepted fully as like a man of the tribe. And one thing what I also know is that in a lot of these rituals, there's like also like a submission of the sword to the feminine in these old rituals, like the sword, or like something like a phallic symbol that gets like sacrificed in some sense. But then there also being like this like return of it in needs of when chaos comes knocking on the door.
Yeah, that element of reintegration, particularly for the male rituals, where there was a violent and sort of warlike training that seems to have gone on, where they may have also been sort of part of a kind of a territorial militia or defense force. I've read things to that effect, where they may have been raiding other communities, as part of their training. But there is that reintegration where you learn to balance those warlike instincts and those abilities with peace and with membership in the community that makes you fit for fatherhood, for leadership, for any other social role that you might have, where you have to have impulse control. You have to be able to moderate your capacity for violence, but you also want to be a proven resource in terms of being able to help provide for the community, defend the community. You want to have a community of peers that sort of recognizes those abilities through shared stories, through shared experience. That reintegration is something that I think we lack right now, like the storytelling and the meaning behind initiation. Like I said, I think in a lot of our cultures, there are still these sort of degraded rites of passage. Like when I was young, driving, having any sort of like first sexual relationship, that was like a rite of passage. Doing illegal or risky things, like there was a certain age where all of my male peers, we all were doing pretty pretty bad things, and then it stopped. But it's sort of like there was no meaning behind it. There was nothing to take up that experience and be like, oh, now you've learned something from this. We are now there was no narrative sort of story behind coming back to the community in that sense. There was no storytelling behind it. There was no myth. And I think it's in some sense, the actual rites or rituals are kind of the easy part. When I think more about it, it's like the deeper meaning and behind the ability to integrate it and to have it be something that you can use an example or look back on in your own experience and have it be a meaningful story about the entire life process. That seems to be lacking in our modern society quite a bit.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. And I think you're right with that, with the myth and story part, because I mean, even though like yeah, you can just do it in some sense, and there's something to it, like even in like the I guess the degraded modern form, but the story, yeah, that's definitely, but that's kind of also then in that sense a cultural thing in of itself, these kind of stories. Because if you look at a lot of these tribes, and if you also look at like, for instance, these like different and I think I heard something in like a shamanism group that I'm in, something from Mongolia, I think it was, where the shamans would preside over a lot of these kind of rituals, and their stories, and that what they would tell would be like, oh, quite known in the community already, and they would narrate kind of from these different rituals, what they're doing, and the narration and the storytelling, but also I guess in other traditions, like with for instance the Norse, but and different Scandinavian cultures, for instance, it's like the poetry and these kind of songs are an important aspect of that too, because it adds another layer of meaning on it, where otherwise it's maybe like yeah, maybe it's again like connected to this alignment. Maybe it's like the story brings something like the something like together in that sense, that engages like the brain in a fuller sense, maybe.
Maybe it also has to do with like people relaying what they have learned through these stories, through these songs, through this folklore and art, and that cultural identity helps a lot, I guess, with the initiations into the next phase, because then you have examples of it more to kind of get context from, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Now you're saying that, I don't know, was something. I think that's something Jung had said about like how in these initiation rituals, like a totem or like a clan symbol or some symbol is very important too. He was talking about like different. I think it was Native American tribes that had like different like animals as symbols for that they were kind of like initiation symbol. Like you're now like I don't know, like the sons of the coyote or something, or like the raven, or like different like symbolism like that. Like Egypt has like the sons of the sun, of the sun god, and that kind of like symbolism behind it. But there seems to be like this totem and this identity indeed connected to it too, and that's kind of I kind of feel like another thing that's kind of missing too, and maybe like that's kind of that like I guess this lack of identity is then also kind of linked to this kind of type of rituals at the same time, because it kind of like I guess initiates the people within a particular context to the tribe in a way that's, I guess, more integrated and more like has like these different like I guess warrior drives, but also like the peaceful side in check, like how the old Romans had like outside of Rome was the territory of Mars, inside of Rome was the territory of Quirinus. One was warfare and one was connected to like domestic things and peace and like social things. So kind of. And it's actually interestingly that it was Julius Caesar who broke that taboo in Rome when he marched into the city. He broke that particular taboo because that's kind of why that like was set up, because Mars was only supposed to be Mars with the wolves is outside the city, and inside the city is something else. That's where the social domain is. That's where the peace is, and like but yeah. Anyways, it's something interesting I wanted to bring up too.
No, yeah. I just to add to that, we also we've got the Rubicon, the crossing of the Rubicon, which was the river. It was the main river, and if you crossed it, you crossed into you crossed into Italy itself. And by doing that with a force of arms who were all armed, without prior permission from the Senate, was effectively an act of like war. So that we still use the crossing the Rubicon in many different phrases. So I just thought I'd add that to your statement. Anyway.
Huh. That's very interesting. I didn't know that about the river. I just knew that about Rome, about that particular taboo, but like that it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's in southern. So it's basically next to the modern. It's next to, if you know where Ravenna is. It's in. So it was called, the area it was called was Transalpine Gaul, which is effectively just, southern, northern Italy now, next to a town called Ravenna. But anyway, yeah. Sorry, I've distracted. Yeah.
Sort of makes me think, for some reason, about, is there a relationship there between the bearing of arms and that sort of destructive, warlike energy and the sacred feminine? I'm thinking here of like Celtic myth, where there's lots of stories that involve a male figure that has to go through sort of an initiation process, usually with an otherworldly female figure. I'm thinking like, what's that? Anyway,
yeah, sorry.
I couldn't quite hear you.
No, okay. I carry on. It just sounded like you were talking about the Mabinogion.
Yes, I was. Yeah. So I was going.
Yes.
I was thinking of, like not violating that sort of female
crossing into, yeah.
So respecting. So the idea that your power as a mature man, as a man that has sort of is in this case worthy of kingship, is your ability to restrain yourself and to not violate the sacred feminine, essentially, because if you do, it will bring ruin upon your people. And there's also like smaller stories in Celtic folklore about that when it comes to like the fairy bride stories, where like if you touch a fairy bride with iron, or if you lay a hand on her, she will not only disappear,
or if you touch a fairy, or in nearly all of the myths, it's better. Hold on.
And she won't just disappear either. She will take her cattle, the magical cattle, with her. So this idea of the wealth of the land, the wealth of society, will leave you if you fail to restrain yourself. Seems to be something that sort of comes up, and that we don't have that now. Like we don't have a sense of the sacred right now in terms of that, and like there's no place for those stories of passage. There's almost like there's no meaning for them to grab onto when it comes to that, because we don't respect it anymore. We don't even know how to talk about it.
Well,
I think that's a very interesting point that you're bringing up there about the sacred feminine in that sense, because if you think about like what I just said about like this Koryos figure kind of residing over peace, but also like the social world, that's kind of a very feminine domain, really, in the ancient sense, and kind of reminds me of like the other like similar stories too that have this like submission to the feminine, and like a lot of this stuff from like there's the wolf shamanism, and like a lot of these old rituals, they trace back to like a lot older stuff, like animistic rituals, where there used to be like community, but also like I guess the social aspect, but the land also like connected to the Great Mother, and like different like feminine sacred spirits and deities, and yeah, it I guess that's one important thing that's kind of also kind of done yeah, maybe yeah, missing, and it makes me then also think about like the Egyptian concept of like ma'at, where it's not only just truth, but it's like truth to act well, it's like to be truthful and honorable, not only just with regarding to something like the community, but it even included like the gods, and it included the different spirits, but also the environment, and in that sense like the land in really. So they had that like in their culture, and it was like a very, very important concept for them. It was like seen as very sacred. I mean, they would be judged in the afterlife in their midst for doing that well, and then the kings and the rulers, they would offer statues of that goddess of truth, and this kind of conduct to different deities, so that it would be like, yes, I am doing the proper thing. So it's like what it reminds me of what like Jordan Peterson said about like this ritual where they would take the king out of like Babylon, and see if he's a good Marduk, that he's being like a good king, and he would be faced by truth, and like that he has this like conduct right.
hello. Right.
Yeah, welcome back.
Right. My internet failed.
Okay. So what I kind of was talking about was now about like Ma'at and like but also like Marduk, what Jordan Peterson talked about with regarding to like their conduct and like how they it was also connected to the land, not just like truth, but like that they're honorable and have like this respect for the community, the land, the environment, and in the gods in that sense, that they conduct themselves in a proper manner, because if they wouldn't do that, it would bring misfortune to their society, and it would lead to bad things.
That sounds like very powerful kind of tradition and I guess cultural story to have. And I guess the theory is that that's why they lasted so long, that civilization.
Yeah, from what it said, like a lot of their gods, but a lot of other stuff. I think it was like I think it's like 3,000 years, and I mean they did change. I mean they weren't like a constant, like they adapted and like they did change, but there was still though this like sort of like continual adaptation and continual relationship there still though with the land, and it reflected in like a lot of things that they did, like how they treated the river Nile, but also how they were treating different I guess different animals as being aspects of different gods, and how they were honoring that, but also then the link between like like the river and their and how they did their farming, and their I guess their awareness of like how linked it is, the fertility of the river with the well-being of their farms, that they need to kind of treat the river well, because otherwise they have big problems.
That's a whole part of our mythology that's just missing, I think. Like basically any kind of respect for the source of life, basically any kind of respect for the process of regeneration, um, whether it's the natural world or womanhood in general, or like you can just go on and on about like, all the different aspects of that source, just sort of in our culture being sort of, it's seen more as a resource. It's disenchanted, it's utilitarian, it's a very mechanistic way of looking at the source of wealth or fertility or life. The idea that it's something that you have to respect is pretty foreign to us today, I think.
Sadly. So it seems a lot of the time. But I do not believe that it's totally lost, that meaning, and that we can find it again.
Oh yeah, I agree. It's in there. It's like you said, it's primordial and archetypical. It just needs to be. We will recognize it when we see it, I think. And I think there's something in us that wants it, even if our culture doesn't know how to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, but it's also like just interesting, like tying it back to like being kind of like a good thing, and then the sacred feminine, like this respect for it also. That's I think, I mean, if you think in like Jungian terms, I guess you would be like, it would be like the anima, kind of like you have like your shadow down, but then it's like the shadow, like the eros, like the more fiery masculine aspect, but then you have to integrate the anima, the social aspect, so that you can then properly temper that. And that's kind of like the Jungian perspective on that, but it seems like they had like that understanding in their own way, and I do think that it does show in modern culture in different in really different ways with these aspects, like how how it's playing out, with the social part too, like, because a lot of it is also connected, I would say, to like community too, because it's like it builds community to these kind of like rituals and these kind of but also this, I guess, this form of respect and these I guess the integration of these different aspects, because I mean they're in that sense also like aspects of ourselves, really, not just something that's outside of us.
I see it as being the feminine is the material, and the in a way the sea could be seen as feminine too, but it's like the possibility for life. It doesn't exist without the feminine, and neither without the masculine. So we kind of need to bring the both together and find that like middle way where both can exist together, and for that we need to notice that what we do to our environment, we do to ourselves. I think that's important to remember.
So to kind of scale back, like, or zoom out a little bit, like, I think there's a sense in which we do it to ourselves, and we do have this sort of these relationships, at the scale of our entire society. But like, is that something we can fix? Is that something that we can, like, does it make sense to problem solve? I don't want to get too meta here, but it's like, where is the place for solving that scale of problem versus telling stories and having a sense of meaning, shared meaning within our own family groups, within our own communities, like where we actually live our lives? Does that make sense? It's sort of like, that's sort of like a scale of meaning making that we have a power to impact, even if it doesn't necessarily spread too much further beyond that. Whereas when I think about the evolution of our society and where it's going, like, it's very hard to feel a sense of agency or hope, at least for me, about where it's going, right? It's sort of like, it's not the sort of scale of a problem that I could ever imagine contributing a solution to. That could just be me as being somewhat of a realist or even a pessimist, but it's sort of like, when I think about my own agency for meaning making, it's much more grounded in my family, in the people I see and work with every day, my neighbors. Like, that's kind of, I can't make a difference too much beyond that.
Well, I'd say in relation to that, I'd say what happened? Why? Because at one point, as far as I know, we had all of these sort of coming of age and all of this stuff in our. So what happened? What went wrong along the journey? Why aren't the new generation being taught these things? What's happened there? And I think once we find the root cause of what's occurred, or at least the causes, we can, well, technically chop out, well, to use a term, we can effectively chop off the roots and then pull the tree out, because you can't chop the tree down without cutting out the roots. Anyhow, that's just my point of view. And we can't say that we are feeling bad about the future if we do nothing about it in our common sense now. Anyway, I'll be silent again. We just need to find the points where it started dissipating, of where we are actually initiating people into our society, where we're teaching them good values. Why is this just disintegrated? Anyway.
I think that it has to do with the fact that we have become too detached and not aligned with the truth that we need both the masculine and feminine in harmony together. And because we have rejected one or the other, then it becomes unstable. And what we can kind of though see is that if it isn't aligned with the truth, then eventually it will crumble. It can't last long then if it is so detached from it. But the truth is still there, and I don't think everything will collapse, and that we can rebuild better again.
And then in that sense, I think both you, Lynn, but also you, Mcapello, but also you, Atom, are kind of all correct. It's like, yes, it's probably like best to like do something in like the local sense. It's like trying to scale like big mountains and being like, it's like wanting to like you have not done anything and you're like, oh yes, I'm gonna scale Mount Everest now. It's like that would be like, fuck.
We need to start with ridges first.
Yeah, it's like, it's like yeah, you choose your battles, basically, kind of thing. It's like that's a bit too fucking massive to do. It's like that's a task, man. It's like, but I think like that like, I really do think that it is like the small things what you're talking about, Mcapello, that really ends up making the real difference. It's like one man cannot solve this entire thing. This is so massive that it's like it is Mount Everest scale shit. So it's like it's massive, but like in that sense, like what agency do we have in that? But what we do have agency in is like what you pointed out in our immediate environment, and that can in of itself ripple out in that sense. And then but the thing is that these other people that know people that you don't know, and that ripples out. So in that sense, it has such an effect as well. And it's like historical knowledge of like what went wrong. That's good knowledge to have too, so you can like not make the same mistake again. And at the same time, it's like there's also truth in the fact that like that what is true and actually is the truth remains, because the thing is that it will always try to get back to that, because it tries to self correct to get that balance. To get that balance back, because the thing is that something that is very detached and does not take its environment into consideration and basically spoils its own nest, it's like that's not a good thing either. It's like that ain't gonna last. But the thing is that in that sense, you can also see it in it's like the sacred feminine is still there, like the Mother Earth is still there. That like within chaos there's still this like potential, this creative potential there at the same time too. And it's like from that creative potential and from this like potential of transformation and regeneration, there is also kind of like a hope of, indeed, like what you said, Lynn, to build something new. Hopefully this time with like the proper things in mind, and especially like what you said, Adam, with like the past things too. It's like what went wrong. Like wait, where did we make a mistake?
Exactly.
Yeah, and can we learn? You know, is there going to be enough memory for us to learn?
I think that's a really, really good point too, and that kind of makes me think again about Egypt, something that I had read quite recently about how they had like vast knowledge about things that happened in the past, and it was
yes.
it was the priests that that recorded it, like their scribes, and they were recording everything on like perishable materials, but they were recording it over and over, and they were keeping massive records everywhere, like in local areas about the grandeur, the story, and about the gods too. And this like massive historical awareness, I think, played a big role in like why they lasted so long too, because they could look back. They had like artificially prolonged their memory. It's like the Chinese also with their dynasties, like that they had similarly. They have like these ancient records going back like thousands of years.
No. In relation to that, something very interesting. The Egyptians actually had archaeologists digging up and deciphering the people who'd inhabited the land before them. So like what we think of ancient Egyptians, so like Cleopatra, had archaeologists in the easiest way to describe it, up and trying to preserve monuments and trying to discover the histories. And of course, we did have that. But in China, something slightly more, because indeed we did, of course, have all of this stuff about. I just disconnected again, probably. Hold on. No, I'm still connected. Wonderful. Am I still connected? Hello? Can you hear me?
You're good.
Hello? Thank God for that. Okay. In China, whenever we've lost, we know some things about some of this stuff because we have some texts that have survived, but sadly, there was a very, very effective way which different conquering kings did to each other, and emperors and all these dynasties. They would enter the city, they'd kill the royal family, but then they would kill the priests, so the record keepers, and they would burn and destroy all of the records, all of them. So, for example, the end of the Han Dynasty, this man entered the Han capital, and he burnt the library there, and the library there held 3,000 years of it had taken 2,000 carts to transport it all to this one library. This is the entire history of China, the entirety of literature in China, and it was burnt. It took them 4 days to burn the entire library, and it's horrifying, really, because then, well, we have some books remaining, but the entire historical scientific, mathematical knowledge of China was destroyed in 4 days by one man. Anyway, yeah, I'll be quiet again. Just thought I'd add that to Basarius.
That's just, that sounds insane. It sounds like, yeah. But I mean, if you think about like that the reason why they last, or like Egypt lasted for that long that was because of that kind of historical perspective. So it's like, man, that was not a good thing. But I do think, like, you know, like looking back, like how we're in the modern sense, like looking back through archaeology, but also different fields. I do think like there's a lot that we can learn from that, and that we, in some sense, maybe are learning from that. At least some people, at least.
I think that history has got a lot to give us in terms of perspective, and to see how we are different now, or how different times have been different, but also the similarities there is very fascinating.
Yeah, no, it very much is. Very much is fascinating to think about that. But like, yeah, coming back in that sense to, I guess, like rites of passage from and this kind of thing. So it kind of then seems like that kind of like this, I guess, meaning making of like
yeah, slightly gone off track a bit.
Yeah. But like this like meaning making is kind of like, in a smaller sense, is then kind of important, and maybe like, I guess, self initiation is more of like in that sense, like a group thing, like a small sense of community thing, where like a group of people does something that creates this, like, I guess, shared meaning in some sense for their community, that represents for them this like rite, in this, like, I guess, this passage away in whatever form it takes for them.
Hmm.
I think we've gone through a lot of interesting stuff in this talk already.
We have, yeah.
Yeah, we really definitely have. I don't know, like some of that with the sacred feminine kind of reminds me something that I recently read again in Man and His Symbols from Carl Jung, about like some man's dream about initiation, like where he goes from like the hero phase to like initiation into society, and they're Jung. I think it was Jung, or maybe was it one of his associates? I don't know. Maybe it was, but was talking about this like dying, and he was just, like scaling a mountain, and then he was seeing a sarcophagus up there, and then there was like a ritual with like a sun disk happening in this. It was like a dream that this young man had, and he commented on that there was like this need for being like entombed again in some sense in the within like the feminine, like that what it was, I guess in the previous sense it was like liberated from, like it had like freed it, the masculine aspect had freed itself from it, so it became like its own individual, its own ego consciousness, he said, but then it needs to like surrender itself to something higher, and in that context it was like seen within like, I guess, well, a solar deity, but it also kind of recalls the earth, the earth mother at the same time too. So it's like these two things are like combined, from what I remember reading. And then he and then he, I don't know, something about like, again, like giving up the certain, I guess, sense of certain sense of agency by being more, I guess, in control of the impulses, not like squelching them completely, but more like, I have these integrated, and I can be like this aggressive warrior, but at the same time, like I'm not going to be unless I really, really have to, kind of thing. But the feminine and it's the Earth Mother and the sun, like the solar deity, seems to be like important there.
You used the word higher, but I would maybe use the word greater, like a greater whole. Coming back to that after first establishing the individual ego, and then coming back to the greater whole, as in the environment and the community. But that's just me. I'm like sometimes particular with the words.
And in that sense, I mean, with the combination of like that recalling of the Great Mother too, it's like also connected to the environment, and this also the solar. So it's like it's both like connected to the community, and looking back at like Egypt again, it's like with Ma'at, it's like there's like this sense of like, I'm just gonna look up this quote from what it exactly said, because I want to get this one right. Okay, let's get to this. Yeah, it was about the interconnection among the cosmic, divine, natural, and human realms. And then it said further, they were expected to act with honor and truth in matters that involve family, the community, the nation, the environment, and the gods. And they were expected to follow this throughout their daily lives. It's about the Ma'at and the Egyptians within their culture. And I kind of feel like that's kind of was in that sense symbolized by like both the sun and the great mother in that sense of that, like surrendering to kind of both, so the whole, like how you put it, Lynn.
Great. Interesting about the Egyptians.
About them.
Yeah. No, it really is. I don't know, like if I think in that sense there's still something to add about it, other than like, I guess, just to kind of summarize that in that sense there's like I guess this like alignment and with like, I guess the masculine, feminine, and the instincts, but also the environment, and like this I guess like connection to the greater whole being kind of key, but also like meaning making in like a smaller, I guess, everyday sense, kind of connected to that, and like and doing these kind of things in like I guess a small setting, in a group setting, within like the immediate community. So it kind of seems to be like the underlying thing. I don't know if there's anything that anyone would like to add to that. Otherwise, I would like to then maybe round this episode up for today.
I could add a little bit like about that. It's not like there's one initiation and then you're done. It's more like that they keep coming throughout your life. It's different transitions from different circumstances and different phases of your life. And I guess one of them is like the doing dangerous things and be testing your limits and becoming an individual, and then it's coming back from that and to integrate the into the society again, and to bring that kind of instinctual energy with you so that you have it and you can use it if you need it, like you said, but that it doesn't control you, which can happen if you suppress it fully or something like that. Yeah, those are at least two of the main ones, I guess, from coming of age ones, and kind of, yeah. Then later comes some other stuff, but I guess we're not experts on that, are we yet?
No.
Yeah, no, we're not. It's like just figuring things out. But yeah, go ahead, Atom.
We're just a group of people who've got knowledge in different areas, but trying to piece it together by using all of that stuff. But maybe successful, maybe not successful. We'll see.
Yeah, indeed. Like we will see like where this leads. But I do think that these kind of like talks are in that sense good to have, to like bring like different perspectives and different ways of seeing things together, to try to like really like figure this out in that sense, like how in some way, like how certain things could be done in some sense, like at least some, I guess, basics or something at least. And then I do think that like through stuff like this, maybe we can maybe figure something out, but maybe not. Like who knows? Time will really tell.
Yeah.
I do feel like it has meaning already, talking together and noticing that other people too are like pondering these things.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. If no one has anything anymore, then I would say I wanna wrap this episode up for now, and maybe see you all maybe next time.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. It's been very nice to be here. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Whoever is listening.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining, and you also, Mcapello.
Thanks for the talk.